I think let's go. Shall we go? Let's go. Right, we've got a lot to get through, so we are going to kick off now. If there are any latecomers, if you could all pretend that the stuff that they've missed is really, really good, that will be brilliant. Right, hello. Welcome to our first Prospects Illuminate seminar of the year. I know for most of you it feels like approximately 40 years since Christmas, but it's actually still January. So for our first episode, we're going to look forward to 2021. And we're going to make some predictions. So with me today is the Duchess of Gradconsult. I'm gesturing over, even though she's not literally on my left hand. Rebecca Fielding, who you all know. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello, Charlie. For those of you who don't know me, I've been knocking around for about 20 years, employer side, university side, and then 8 years ago, I set up supplier side. And I think I've known the lovely Charlie Ball and the Prospects team for more than 20 years, probably.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, and it's great to be able to do this double act. We've been looking forward to doing this for a little while, so it was quite an effort on my part to keep under wraps that we were doing it actually, but we weren't allowed to tell anybody till the publicity went out. So that was a bit of a shame. But yes, this is going to be good. We're going to try and stick to time. There's going to be a Q&A afterwards where you can ask us anything at all. But first, let's kick off. So here's how this works. At the beginning of every year, Rebecca and I generally tend to take social media and give our takes on what we're likely to happen in the graduate recruitment market in the coming year. But
this year, we decided instead of doing that separately, we're going to do it together and then put it on social media afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Now, ordinarily, what we normally do is we'd look back at the previous year, assess how we did, but we haven't got much time, so 2020, just assume that all our predictions in 2020 came completely true. We were absolutely on point.
Absolutely, completely went to plan. Just that small issue of the global pandemic, which kind of slightly changed things.
Yeah, it didn't necessarily all quite come off. But assuming that 2021 doesn't bring us Godzilla rising from the depths or something like that to ravage the surface world, we will kick off. So, Rebecca, first prediction. What do we reckon? And we've got a presentation, so I'll bring that up first. Wow, okay. This is slick.
My first prediction, and it will be no surprise to those who know me and the passionate kind of work that I do in this area, is that SMEs are going to be absolutely key to our economic recovery during this period. We know from all of our previous recessions that SMEs are the first part of the labour market to recover. They're the quickest to create graduate jobs, and they're the most agile and responsive. They're going to do that much more quickly than the bigger players in the market. So my kind of top tip is for all of those university teams who are here joining us today. We need campaigns. I'd be planning them now. I'd be starting them now, promoting and talking about the benefits of working for SMEs and putting in place support for SMEs as well. There are obviously lots of fantastic examples right across the sector, but I would suggest it's about scaling those and really bumping up that connectivity ready for summer. The conversations we're having with SMEs are telling us, actually, with the vaccine rollout, with things moving in the right direction, this feels like where we should be going about summertime. So I think that we're going to see a nice coincide between SMEs creating jobs and graduating summer class this year. So getting ahead of that with campaigns and programs right now, really critical.
That's right. So, and my first prediction is very, very simple, and it leads on from what Rebecca says. It is going to be better this year. It's very likely to be significantly better this year, but as Rebecca says, probably not until later in this year. All the signals are pointing, and the large organisations and the economic forecasters are all pointing to probably the second half of the year when things really start to get better. It's going to take a little time for that vaccine to roll out, and it must be said, and here's the bit where we say, well done government, you seem to be doing a decent job of rolling that vaccine out. So, and that's very encouraging. So the vaccine rollout is going pretty well. The government's aim is for the majority of adults to be vaccinated by September. So business is looking at the second half of 2021 for things to start emerging into what how the new status quo is going to look. So we're expecting the labour market to improve. We won't get back to where we were this year. We won't get back to where we were this time last year in 2021. It's probably going to be 2022 before that happens, but it will still be a lot more positive. That said, the economic forecasts that are coming out from both government, internal government, the IMF, the OECD, and from private sector organisations who do economic forecasting. They're all expecting unemployment to continue to rise this year because it tends to be a slightly lagging indicator of the economy, and especially amongst young people. Yeah. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the graduate labour market is going to be depressed, because, you know, over all of this hangs a spectre of the fact that things are far worse for non-graduates than they are for graduates. And with the exception of the arts and the creative sector, which has had a terrible time of it, all the worst affected sectors are largely non-graduate employers. But we may need to be braced for relatively gloomy labour market news as a whole through the year, but with the graduate labour market perhaps outrunning it. And as Rebecca says, small businesses at the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my first peek into the crystal ball. What's next on your list, Rebecca?
Thank you very much, Mystic Meg.
Wish I had her hair.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that some of the stats are saying that we're currently about 70% of vacancies.
Yeah. So the data from this week saying we're around 70% of this vacancies. I did actually have a slide at the beginning, which I put in the script and then forgot to put in. So this is Rebecca being tremendously professional and reminding me that I'm not doing my job properly. Which is fine, but we're running at about 70% of vacancies at the moment, and the usual areas are doing pretty well. So we're talking healthcare, social care, education, IT, engineering, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on, because we're going to talk about occupational shortages in a bit. So I'm spoiling one of my predictions.
Yeah, fantastic.
Tremendously unprofessional. But yes, so we're running at about 70%, and there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out about the way people are adapting to virtual working. So Rebecca's prediction is
my next prediction. Yeah. Just before I move on to my next prediction, I want to just segue nicely into something you were talking about, the broad kind of gloomy labour market news, but still reasonably protected graduate market. I think there's a lot of work, and Stephen talks about this quite a lot at the ISE, for us to do to really reassure graduates that things aren't as bad as they're hearing out there. And we know from previous recessions that we've still been unable to fill graduate vacancies even in times of recession, because graduates believe what they're hearing about the broad labour market. So again, lots of important work.
That's right. And of course the ISC do have their survey out in the field. We'll be getting some really good results from that in the next few weeks. So keep an eye out on what Stephen and Tristram have to say.
Absolutely.
The next few weeks.
So our third prediction, my second prediction, is that graduate mobility is going to continue to be quite a complex topic and a crunch issue this year. So we know that many students have been staying at home really since the last year. So that's cutting across the last 2 years of study for our finalists coming in to this summer. And they remain nervous about moving away at the moment. So even if they went to study at a different university away from home, they've been at home, parents and students nervous about moving away. That's been particularly difficult for people who are trying to hire into areas on coastal regions, difficult areas like Plymouth or Portsmouth or Middlesbrough. Anybody who recruits to those sites know that it can be quite difficult to attract graduates in the volumes that you need. So I'm looking at the pharmaceutical industry, nuclear industry, those kind of industries that are, very much located in those areas. I know they've struggled this year. It will, we believe, continue to be an issue this summer and a real challenge. So again, anything universities can do to support people in terms of stipends, bursaries, practical support, I think that will be really helpful, as will targeting local students and connecting them wherever you can with local opportunity in their home regions. I think there's a huge opportunity for the sector to collaborate here in terms of connecting their students into opportunity in their home regions, which may very well be different to their own employer ecosystem and local networks. So we've got huge opportunity here, but let's not underestimate how complex that's going to be. We could well, however, particularly I think by the final quarter of this year, really start to see that issue being unlocked. I think as the vaccine rolls out, we're also going to see a whole raft of graduates who've been locked at home with mum and dad for far too long and desperate to move out. So hopefully towards the end of this year, we're going to start to see that mobility issue shift. I think it's going to remain an issue this summer, though, I have to say.
That's right. And it's all tied in, and hugely important issue. And I don't think that particular issue can be unstated. It's absolutely on point. We've got virtual working, so this is going to be a really big feature of, well, the labour market of the future. But it's caught on in a very big way. Online recruitment setups have worked a lot better than we've expected, as Rebecca and Rise can attest. They've done virtual assessment centres are a lot more effective than I think people anticipated. New virtual recruitment systems have delivered a lot of efficiencies. They work quite effectively. They make it easier for people to get to interview. They make it easier for you to convene an interview panel. And of course, if you're going to be working virtually, at least in part, a virtual interview is a sensible way to assess those skills. So we can expect those changes to stick. At the moment, about a third of the workforce is working virtually, but in most or in many large graduate professions, so it's the proportion is significantly higher. So professional services, we're looking at about 80% of the workforce is currently working solely from home. And despite what Boris Johnson told business leaders last week, when he said, "Oh, you're not going to bother keeping this once the pandemic's over." Sorry, Boris, they are going to bother keeping this sort of thing when the pandemic's over. And it's not just in business services and IT. Make UK did a big survey of manufacturing businesses just before Christmas, and they found that 43% of manufacturing businesses were, at the moment, nearly half of the whole manufacturing sector is working from home, and 43% of manufacturing businesses want to keep or expand virtual working post-pandemic, because workers want the opportunity to work virtually. So it has this implication on mobility, and particularly as people come to realise that you don't need to be based in, the most obvious example is you don't need to actually live in London anymore to have a job with a London-based business. And I think my feeling is, and my suspicion is, that as time goes on, that will be to the benefit of cities with or parts of the country with a high standard of living and relatively low cost of living. So Sheffield is a very good example. You can take advantage of opportunities outside of South Yorkshire, but remain living in Sheffield or Liverpool or Newcastle. Cracking cities with good with good standards of living and relatively low cost, and you can telecommute and maybe go to the office that you're ostensibly based in once a month. And I think as more students and graduates become aware of this opportunity, and more businesses take advantage of the flexibility this provides and the ability that it offers them to get a more diverse workforce with a more diverse range of perspectives, I think we'll really start to see that take off. So you won't necessarily have to live in expensive city X. You won't necessarily have to pay Manchester flat prices or Leeds flat prices or London flat prices to take advantage of the excellent labour markets there. And this has an implication for cities, for the general way cities operate. By and large, KPMG are estimating that many of our major cities will see about a sixth of their workforce, at least, and in some cases significantly more. But in Manchester, for example, it's about a sixth of the workforce will be working virtually permanently. And this has a lot of implications for retail. So we're looking at thousands. We're looking at 400,000 job losses in city centre retail. But some of that will shift to the periphery, because people will be doing their shopping and their hospitality. They'll be going to cafes and bars in the outskirts where they live instead. So it won't necessarily be complete job losses, but we will be, you'll see your Starbucks moving to commuter areas. You'll see your Pretz and sandwich or local sandwich shops replacing. So there are profound changes coming, I think, for our urban areas. What effects are we going to have on learning by osmosis? Andy Haldane, who's the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, gave a very interesting speech in November in which he talked about the fact that he appreciated not having to commute, and he doesn't even have to use Northern Rail. He appreciated the fact they didn't have to commute, but he was concerned about his new graduates who weren't learning by osmosis. They weren't physically present, watching teams take part. You know, earwigging on calls is actually really important. You know, being able to just ad hoc convene with people, having those conversations by the kettle are actually hugely important for people's formal and informal learning.
Absolutely.
And of course, what effect does it have on well-being? There was a really interesting report just before Christmas from Aviva, which was showing that although the majority of workers are keen to expand home working, there is a profound impact on well-being and mental health, and particularly on young people. And the majority of young workers reported feeling anxious at some point during the last 3 months. And 1 in 6 said that their mental health was difficult. And I think what we're likely to see here is businesses are committed to continuing remote working because it works. It works for the majority of workers and it works for them. It allows them to reduce office space, allows them to remain efficient. These setups like this actually work. It allows us to convene 400 people on a webinar without us having to book a room or you all having to travel to a particular place. So there are a lot of advantages to it, but there are significant well-being implications. And I think we are going to see the rise of a set of professionals whose basic job is to make sure that virtual workforces are okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that will require a new set of skills. We know prospects, we've got people who we've worked with who've done that for years and are now finding themselves inundated with demand. It's not a very large workspace at the moment, but there are opportunities here for people in health and psychology to expand the profession out. That I think will have a big effect. And I was going to say the large majority of workforces in IT professional services are now working from home with little effect on productivity, but oh my God, homeschooling.
Yeah. Let's move on quickly from that.
Let's do that. Let's do that. Your turn, Rebecca. Over to you.
Absolutely.
Final prediction.
So this takes us on to my final prediction, which is that after the absolute disaster of Fatima leaving her career to be a ballerina and retraining cyber, I think we've actually got a huge amount of work to do as a sector to more positively land that message with students and graduates about the opportunity for non-linear careers, not least of which is because we have still, even in the current climate, got lots of very hard to fill vacancies. I saw Kate Croucher on the call here earlier today. I'm sure she would be one of the first to be in the queue to talk about this particular subject and topic. We need bright, intelligent, brilliant graduates from law, from psychology, from sport, which are, you know, on the face of it, linear disciplines, but we all know their destinations are predominantly non-linear. We need to be doing a huge amount between now and graduation to really land that message positively that getting a career outside of their specialism is not a failure. It's absolutely the norm. We need to be working with academics and embedding non-linear work opportunities to really open those students up. It's going to be crucial to our economic recovery based on the fact that we have a very non-linear graduate job market in the UK, that we are able to work on both sides of that fence. So working with employers, educating employers, particularly SMEs and mid-sized employers, on the benefits of recruiting from that non-linear pool, what you might call the non-cog type market, and those people who are in this working directly with the student-facing market, helping them to understand the transferability of their skills and opening them up to, through our academic colleagues and partners, the wealth of fantastic opportunities where their transferable skills can take them. Judith Baines did a wonderful campaign on this last year at Hertfordshire called Widening Horizons. Definitely one to have a look at, but I think we've all got work to do this year, and it will be key to unlocking that economic productivity, is enabling them to make that transition in a positive way. Over to you for your last prediction, Charlie.
Right then, because as we mentioned, as I keep going on about, we've still got occupational shortages. So we entered the pandemic shorting graduates in many areas, in health, social care, education, engineering, IT. Demand in most of those areas, in fact all of those areas, has pretty much held up. So we will leave the pandemic short in all of those areas. Many firms recruiting in these fields are saying Brexit is making it harder. So this is actually our first formal mention of Brexit. Not bad, not bad.
Particularly for you and I.
Yeah, particularly for you and I. but Brexit is going to make it difficult for employers to fill vacancies in those areas, because generally they would backfill vacancies they couldn't fill in, particularly in tech and engineering and health, with EU nationals. So this does actually mean a potential Brexit dividend for engineers, but for UK graduates in these disciplines, as they'll be in even more demand. The main issue, though, is that we just don't have enough graduates in any of these areas to actually fill the demand that's out there. So there will be a challenge. There'll be a big challenge in making sure that, particularly when recovery comes around, that we get enough people into these disciplines. And one thing that Stephen Isherwood has been saying and been counselling, and we're hearing from a lot of other employers, is one of the big worries for employers is when that second half of the year comes around and the vaccine's been rolled out and restrictions are starting to be lifted on the economy, they will be all lifted for everyone at once, pretty much, and then everyone will be trying to recruit.
Yeah,
this is quite a likely situation where come June, July, August, restrictions will be lifted and suddenly everybody will have 12 months of pent-up recruitment demand that they'll all need to satisfy at once. We've got to make sure if that does happen, the SMEs don't miss out. We've got to really make sure that's important, because that will really set recovery back. But it's going to be a real crunch for healthcare, IT, engineering, and so on. So that's something we want to look out for. So we've got a very quick summary. SMEs are going to be crucial. This summer is key. Because it is coming, the recovery is coming, but we probably won't be back to where we were in 2021. Graduate mobility is a crunch issue because virtual working is here to stay. That message about non-linear careers that Rebecca put so passionately and so articulately is absolutely crucial to deliver, because we have a lot of shortages even now, and it's only going to be worse later in the year. And for those of you who follow the LinkedIn, as yet we have no evidence of an impending alien invasion to keep 2021 on brand, nor are there signs that Godzilla really is going to rise from the oceans. But keep watching the skies, because you know what we know what the last year's been like. So that's that.
One thing I wanted to add, if I may, just on the potential recruitment bum fight coming for this summer, I think another thing to kind of highlight to people is really great engagement and partnership with your alumni. So the class of 2020 may very well still be underemployed or unemployed as we come into summer 2021. Yeah. Again, some great work that's been going on with continuing to engage in class of 2020, the likes of Liverpool Lad Signpost, but connectivity back into that class and creation of opportunity, I think will be key again to kind of meeting that demand this summer. I think that's us done, isn't it, Charlie?
That's us done, and we've stuck to time, so we are great.
6 minutes of questions.
Officially, we are great. So we've got some. I'm going to actually answer a point that came up in chat first, actually. So apologies for Q&A, but something came up in chat that I think is worth stressing, which was about, do we see the internship and placement market improving this year as a consequence of things? What do you think, Rebecca?
I think it's less likely. I think the immediate recovery will come in graduate jobs. I think internships and placements, there'll be more of a lag. And the reason for that is that in recovery, particularly, not less so the corporates, but particularly the other kind of big volume part of the market, which is made up of SMEs and missing middle, when they've got a need, they need that need to be fulfilled, particularly if they're going to be looking at growth. And like I say, we've not just got pent up recruitment needs, we've got pent up expenditure, we've got pent up economic activity. We're expecting this explosion of economic activity once we're able to again. So I think they will be focused primarily on making new hires that can stay in their organisation, and there'll be more of a lag with the interns and the placements. With the exception, of course, of any funded internships, which that end of the market are always keen to make the most of and will be on the lookout for, because they know it's the market conditions that are right for it.
Fantastic, thanks very much. So we'll start off with a formal question. Sorry to bump in there, but I thought that's a question that comes up quite a bit, and I thought it was very important to get Rebecca's take on that. So Katie Martin has this question about working with SMEs. So there's another one for you. They don't want to hear from me, Rebecca. It's quite right. They want to hear from you, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. Do you feel it's more about scaling up internships, running skills-based programs and training, or generally just engagement to promote vacancies, or indeed a combination of all of the above?
Yeah, absolutely, Katie. It's a combination. I think there is a need for a campaign specifically looking at and promoting the benefits of those opportunities and providing students and graduates with the knowledge that that is where the majority of job opportunity and economic creation will be coming from this summer. They may very well be completely unaware of that. So I think there is a huge piece which is about messaging and campaign. And then the secondary piece to that, as you say, is about connectivity. Adele Brown said brilliantly from DMU recently on an event that I was at that actually the key for her and her team is putting students and graduates in the same space and alongside those employers and getting out of the way. That is what her job is, and that is where the magic happens. And I think she couldn't be more right. So finding ways to seamlessly connect graduates and students with those opportunities, I think, is the key, alongside really positive campaign.
Smashing. So Rish has, are there any indications that students and graduates will remain nervous about moving in the future? So prospects of being stranded from families, or maybe being stuck at home with families if there is a new strain. I think we'll have to see, but I think at the moment people have got used to the situation that they're in largely. You hear a lot of some high profile moaning, but generally there's a lot of consent with the lockdown situation. So I think that students and graduates will need to be reassured that things are completely safe before they start to be really confident about moving. I don't know what you think about that, Rebecca.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think there will be a lag. I think once we know they're feeling more safe, we're going to see greater mobility. But I think it's going to be a real challenge this year for anybody who's hiring into difficult to reach regions. I think geo-targeting students from home regions is going to be the key to those campaigns this year. Over to you. What's next?
Right, Claire Flannery, what role do you see the government's Kickstart scheme playing in graduate employment? Now, I think, yeah, there's a skepticism. I think in general, the evidence is very plain from business that they're not that keen on the Kickstart scheme. There are a couple of sectors, it's not so bad in construction and manufacturing, where they have a little bit more experience of engaging with these kind of schemes. But I think the general consensus on Kickstart is it's a nice idea, but there are a little too many barriers in place, a bit too much red tape to make it really worth people's while. It might need modification, but I think by and large, employers are not that enthusiastic.
Completely agree, Charlie. Everything we've seen with the local labour market and economic development work we've been doing and the business engagement has told us it will work for some larger employers in particular sectors, particularly low skill, high volume, retail, logistics, warehousing, like you say, some manufacturing and engineering. It's unlikely to play a significant role in the graduate labour market in its current guise. I think it would need to be changed significantly, not least is the fact that the job centre is the primary deliverer of this scheme, as opposed to university career services really being able to be actively involved in it. And I think that's a major hurdle.
It is fair to say that the government actors involved in this are aware that this is the view. The question is, do they have the time or capacity to fix it? I mean, you've got to bear in mind Kickstart was put together very, very rapidly, and you know it's a noble effort, but it doesn't quite hit the spot for our group. Jackie Darwell, do we have any up-to-date data specifically relating to year-long industrial placements to commence summer 2021? Candidly, not really at the moment. We might need to wait a little bit. What's the current demand like from employers and students? Does this still differ between larger graduate recruiters and SMEs? I'll say I don't have any data on that just at the moment. We might hope to see some perhaps through the ISE and through some other efforts later on.
Yeah, I think the most recent data from the ISE demonstrated that industrial placements were significantly more impacted than graduate recruitment. So I think you can realistically be looking at a reduction in that market of well over 30%. There will be sector exemptions to that, as Kate Carrick said in the chat earlier. Tech's thriving at the moment. I think there's still going to be plenty of industrial placements in engineering and software. I think we're going to have far fewer in other sectors. So it depends which student population I think you're working with as to whether or not you're going to see a big impact on your industrial placement offer this year.
Right, we've hit time, but we've got a few more questions. Are you able to stay and answer? I think we've got 3 or 4 more questions, Rebecca. Are you able to stay for those?
I'm absolutely able to stay. Yeah.
Right, we'll get through the last few questions. Sorry for if you may now go, you may now leave if you wish to.
Thank you.
But otherwise, we'll continue to answer the last few questions. We won't take any more. We'll answer the questions that we've got now. Tom Davis asks, what's the best sources to find reliable information and stats about graduate recruitment in an institution's local area? We're looking to promote Leeds as a place to live and work. In general, that data is not publicly available, but it is extractable. So most institutions will have the capacity to produce that data for you. And then there are my colleagues, me and my colleagues at JISC, who are also able to do this stuff. So if you want to have a conversation with us, we can try that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also say that your local chamber are often a very good source of local labour market information. The regional chambers that we're involved in participating and produce some really worthwhile quarterly economic data from their regional business base.
They
do. Hugely helpful.
The QES is very, very good, and it's important for those of us who are long in the tooth in this field. Chambers haven't always been very good at this stuff. But in the last few years, they've really upped their game. So if you've been in this game for a long while and had trouble with chambers 4 or 5 years ago, try them now. You might find things are a lot better than they were. Mark Powell, what do you see as the best online sources for finalists to find work experience opportunities? Ooh.
Very much depends on the sector, I would say. And as we all know, online sources aren't the best sources always of finding particularly work experiences. We all know the most effective ones are about the informal, the networking, the relationships, the connectivity and opportunities that career services through relationships can create. So I don't know, tricky question mark. It really depends on the sector. There are lots of great places that you can go and lots of great platforms and connectivity that people can access. I think it's very sector specific.
But what there isn't is one central resource that does this all. You can just put your students out and go, that's where all your work experience opportunities are going to be.
And if, Mark, I don't know if you're an employer or if you're an advisor, but if you're an employer and you're looking for some advice, I would say, my experience as an employer was always to kind of test and iterate with a number of different platforms and look at your return on investment. So actually, which routes to market are finding the quality candidates that you're looking for. And as I say, geo-targeting will be absolutely key to that this year. So look for partners and providers who are able to target those home region postcodes for you.
Brilliant. So Rish has another question about the B word, the Brexit word, and hard to fill vacancies. What about the potential impact of the post-study work visa, or whatever it's called this week? Yes, very good point. Do we have any indications? Now, we have very little hard data for obvious reasons. I think there is cautious optimism. The post-study work visa looks like it's moving in the right direction, but it's difficult to say exactly how much impact that's going to have, because the candid answer is that actually a lot of international students aren't intending to stay in the UK. Despite what rhetoric and the Home Office says, the data shows quite strongly that most international students go home, go to work at home. So I think the post-study work visa is it's going in the right direction. It is a way of reassuring our potential PGs that we're not casting them aside, but I don't know that it's going to have a massive impact on these issues. Maybe in some specialist areas of healthcare, possibly. But we'll see. But as always, the proof will be when we start to see a real impact on this on the sector.
And we're working with a number of employers at the very high end science, kind of science, medtech, technology, which of course hugely favoured by government at the moment. I think we're going to see an impact there as well.
I think that's true.
Postdocs, PhD.
Private sector R&D will probably benefit from that, and of course that's what it's designed for. So there will be a benefit in there, and one big One big advantage of the pandemic is it's really refocused. The pharma industry in the UK, hugely important science employer, hasn't had a brilliant time of it in the last few years, but funnily enough has really stepped up to the plate this time around in the last year. And I think that will be, this could be a bit of a shot in the arm for science, and the post-study work visa will help in R&D. So there are positives to be taken there.
Can I cheekily answer one more from Janice, Charlie? Would that be okay?
Of course you can, yeah, because it's your thing. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Janice.
How's Aberdeen? Not too snowy, I hope.
Hope not. So Janice has asked, how can we convey the message to employers that they should look outside narrow disciplines for future graduate recruits? I can't tell you how many times I've had to discuss the fact that we've got many more graduate marketing vacancies than we have marketing graduates, which Charlie will tell you. They need
twice as many.
Absolutely. They need to look beyond marketing disciplines, particularly smaller employers really struggle with this message. How can you get that? What are the most effective ways to do that? Videos. There's some great videos if you look at the Open University about the videos they've put together for SMEs, giving them advice, and well, just all employers actually, about who to consider and what you're looking for in a role. So they're accessible anytime, and you can of course signpost employers to them. And case studies are the other fantastic example. So we've used lots of case studies of English graduates, law graduates becoming brilliant coders and allowing them to see the size of the talent pool. So the third factor I would use is data. So actually looking at the number of vacancies versus the number of graduates in the labour market, and allowing them to see the competition and the reality of the salaries that are being offered to those students, particularly if you want a software engineering graduate. You're not going to compete for that student, or you're going to have to offer a lot more money than potentially you want to offer. So I use data, I use case studies, and I think using videos, toolkits and sessions and webinars like this can also be useful, particularly if they're recorded, so they're on demand. A lot of what we know about these employers that are outside of the corporate well-informed pool is that they need to access it when they need to access it, rather than at specific points in the year.
And actually, just to go on to that and to answer Lee's question, this session is being recorded. The slides will be available. Everybody who registered will get a link post-session, which will have a link to the recording and to all the slides. So don't worry about any of that. Megan's asking about the creative industry. Where do creatives stand in terms of recovery and the prospects of future employment for grads? There's no sugar in this pill. Currently, half of the workforce in the creative industry is furloughed, and the creative industry has had a rotten time of it. There is a lot of pent-up demand, and there's a lot of goodwill towards that sector, but the businesses still have to be there post-pandemic for them to be able to benefit from it. It is a really, really hard time for the creative industry. It's going to take a while for them to get back on their feet. You know, the industry has not died, but we are likely to see a long process of recovery over the next few years. It doesn't mean there'll be opportunities for people. Some businesses, some otherwise viable businesses, will not survive, unfortunately. And prospects for graduates in the creative industry are not that great at the moment. They will improve, but unfortunately, I think we'll need to see a strong relaxation of social distancing, and for these businesses to get back on a sounder financial footing. The demand is there. People really, really want to go to live music events and theatre and galleries and museums and so forth. They really want to do these things, but they're going to be the last. They're going to be the last to recover, unfortunately, I think.
There's two things I'd add to that as well, if I may, Charlie. The first is that from a graduate labour market perspective, there will be a long tail to this, because in the 3 to 4 year recovery period for this sector, graduates are going to be competing against very experienced professionals who are still trying to get back into this market because it will have shrunk so significantly. So I think, again, no sugar in that pill, I'm afraid. And then the other big issue, and it was all over the news and Radio 4 yesterday, is the impact of Brexit. On touring, on the music industry, on the creative industry more generally. It may very well be that government listens to that message. I think there's now a significant pressure on them to reconsider some of that policy, but it won't be quick.
No, it won't.
I think there's two further factors that are really compounding factors for those. I
think the brutal truth at the moment is, and we have to be honest, is that we're going to have to get used to, at least for the time being, a smaller creative sector and fewer opportunities for graduates in the medium term. We'll get the sector will get back on its feet. It's extremely resilient, and very, very innovative and very good at finding its way around solutions. But there simply won't be the volume of opportunities available in the creative industry for the time being, as there was in the last few years. Katrina asks about the impact on BAME students and graduates and how this might continue in 2021-22. The simple fact is we're in an economic downturn. An economic downturns exacerbate disadvantage, and we've also seen from specific data that the BAME community has been particularly disproportionately affected. However, business is aware of this, and diversity is an important driver now. So we may see that being a divide that's bridged, or that disadvantage may be hopefully actively combated. But again, we can't sugar the pill there. The impact on BAME students is disproportional.
Yeah, and it's also worth saying that is a slightly unhelpful acronym when looking at some of those advantages and disadvantages, because actually Asian males perform incredibly well in terms of graduate outcomes, don't they? Black males, however, completely different conversation. So,
Black African, the difference between Black African male outcomes and Chinese male outcomes is very, very stark.
Yeah, very stark indeed.
But no, understanding the point, the essential point is, any group that suffers any kind of disadvantage, being it disabled, being it women, being older workers or younger workers, or people from minority ethnic backgrounds, any group that suffers disadvantage in the labour market, will see that, has seen that, and will continue to see that exacerbated by the pandemic. And we will need to take positive steps to reduce that disadvantage as far as it is possible.
Right, you said we wouldn't take any more because we're nearly at 15:15, Charlie.
Oh gosh, I'm going to answer the one question from Sally about self-employment. Sally, we have seen a lot more interest in self-employment, but again, we have to be candid and say that the self-employed have taken a clobbering, except in certain sectors. But by and large, the self-employed over the last 12 months have seen their billable hours drop substantially. They've seen incomes drop substantially. Half of all the self-employed are now earning less than £1,000 a month, as of most recent figures that we have. So again, we have to be realistic about the prospects for self-employment. Part of that is because in graduate terms, so much of the self-employed are in the creative sector there. Yeah. You know, if you're in self-employed IT specialists specializing in networks or events, you've not exactly seen a downturn in business. So it's quite sector specific. You know, if you're a self-employed occupational therapist, happy days. If you're a self-employed musician, not so great. So we have to be mindful that there are opportunities and disadvantages, but in general, the business model of many self-employed people has been hampered by the pandemic. But again, we're talking about an extremely innovative and creative sector who will find ways to make money. We just need to be mindful that for some prospective entrepreneurs, making money will happen in a different way.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I think, as always, any recession and economic downturn and this has been a transformational period in our society and our economy in terms of how we deliver things and what's in demand from people as well. It also creates opportunity. You know, I've got absolutely no doubt that whichever entrepreneur wants to create a business which allows people to take their lockdown puppies on holiday with them as soon as we're able to, it's going to make an absolute fortune. Because I don't know about exactly. You know, we've all had 6 months at home with these lockdown puppies. Can you imagine putting them in kennels when they spent all day, every day with us for the first 6 months of their life? The old models won't work. Somebody's going to need to find a new way to do that. And that's just one little kind of funny observation. There will be massive opportunities created. I think encouraging those entrepreneurs of the future who can identify those opportunities and leverage them quickly is absolutely key. What will be difficult in that, and again, we need to be honest with our students, is accessing the finance and releasing the finance. But once we come through, I think, the vaccine programme, we may very well see some government stimulus for that part of the market. They'll be very keen to see startups and entrepreneurship, I think. So watch for that, I think, later this summer and into the autumn, some money for entrepreneurship. It may continue to be very technology and medtech and pharmaceutical and research and science focused. It may not. Depends, I think, on how the economic recovery goes.
Right, I think we'll wrap up there. Thanks
Yeah.
very much, Rebecca. It's been brilliant to have you.
It's been brilliant to do this with you. And you know, the script says here that you've been, you know, an entirely adequate host, Charlie.
That's it. Yeah, I think that's what I aspire to be. Adequacy will do me fine at the moment. So thanks very much, Rebecca. It's been great. If you enjoyed this, give us some feedback, and we'll see what we can do in future. As we say, as we said, if you've registered, you'll get a link to all the content. You may now leave and go about your business. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take
Bye-bye.
care, everyone.
Have a good day. Go and enjoy the snow.